Welcome back to Horror Galaxy. Tonight, I have 6 applachian stories for you. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed. Because once you step onto the Horror Galaxy, you don't walk alone. The whistle ripped through the museum like a blade. So sharp, I actually flinched and slapped my hand against the desk, trying to find the volume knob that didn't exist. I stared at the old CCTV monitor, waiting for the usual explanation. Some kid outside, some truck brake squeal, anything. But the sound held steady, long and deliberate, like someone was leaning into it with purpose. I checked my watch without thinking. 3:13 in the morning. That time didn't matter to me yet. It would. I stood up so fast my chair rolled back into the wall. My radio crackled when I moved, but nobody was on the other end. I grabbed my flashlight, clipped it to my belt, and did the thing I always did when the building made a noise. I walked it off. The place was small. A coal museum built out of what used to be an office near the old mine entrance. Families came during the day, school trips, locals bringing relatives through, and then at night it became a building full of empty exhibits and locked doors. The whistle came again. Not from outside, from inside, from the mine exhibit corridor. That corridor was the centerpiece. A fake tunnel entrance built into the back wing. Black painted timbers, a little track on the floor, rusted carts. It looked real enough that kids got quiet when they stepped in. But it wasn't a working mine. It was a sealed imitation leading to a real, blocked-off section behind it. That part, the part nobody toured, was locked up because of liability and because the old entrance behind the exhibit had been welded shut decades ago. It was written in the maintenance binder like a warning in faded ink dio non tiar. CLSTR I walked there anyway. My boots clicked on the floor tiles, echoing too loud. I kept my flashlight down because the emergency lighting was enough, but my hand was tight around it. The closer I got, the more the air felt wrong, stale, like a basement that never gets aired out. When I reached the mouth of the exhibit tunnel, I stopped and listened. Silence. Then the whistle blew again, shorter this time. 2 sharp bursts, like a signal. I stepped into the exhibit corridor and my light caught it immediately. A set of footprints on the floor, not muddy, not wet. Coal dust. Thick enough that you could see the pattern of tread, like somebody had walked through a pile of black powder and then paced right into the clean museum corridor. The prints were fresh. The dust was matte and dry, not smeared by time or cleaning. I followed them without thinking, 1 foot in front of the other. My own steps careful beside them, like I didn't want to ruin evidence. They led straight past the cart display, straight to the back service door that wasn't part of the public tour. That door should have been clean. Nobody went back there. It was locked with a heavy hasp and 2 padlocks. The corridor lights didn't reach the top half of it very well, but I could see enough. The padlocks were still on. I shined my flashlight along the hasp, expecting scratches, a broken latch, something that explained the footprints. But everything looked untouched. No forced entry, no bent metal. The footprints stopped in front of the door like the person had stood there, facing it, and then just stopped existing. I swallowed hard and said out loud, because I didn't like the silence, "Hello." My voice sounded small in that corridor. No answer. Just my breathing and the faint hum of the building. I leaned close to the door and put my ear against the metal. It was cold. I listened for shuffling, for a drip, for anything. Nothing. Then, from behind the door, came the faintest exhale, like someone had breathed onto the other side of it. I jerked back so hard my shoulder hit the wall timber. My heart didn't just race. It stuttered, like it forgot how to work for a second. "Who's in there?" I said. My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated that it did. The radio on my belt hissed once, like it was about to speak, then went dead quiet again. I took the keys off my ring. My hands were already shaking, and the keys clinked together, too loud, too honest. I tried the top padlock first, even though I knew it wouldn't work. It did, but only because the lock was still locked. The key turned. It opened. That shouldn't have been possible. I froze with the padlock dangling open in my fingers. I stared at it like it had moved on its own. Then I checked the second lock, the lower one. Same thing. My key turned, smooth like it had been waiting. I didn't remember locking those with my key. Those locks were maintenance locks. That was the whole point. Security kept the building secure. Maintenance had their own access. I pulled both locks off and set them on the floor, right beside the coal dust prints. I should have stopped there. I should have backed away and called someone. But in my head, this was still a problem I could solve by walking into it. I was the night guard. That was the job. Find the issue. Fix the issue. Don't wake up the whole town. I unhooked the hasp and pulled the door open. A smell rolled out. Not rot, not sewage, something older. Damp stone and iron and deep, trapped air that never sees daylight. I stood there, flashlight pointed into the dark, and I felt that instinctive pressure in my chest that says, "Do not go in there." The whistle blew again. Not in the museum this time. Deeper. Behind the door. From inside the sealed space. It wasn't loud now. It sounded far away, swallowed by rock. That's what pushed me forward. If it was coming from in there, it meant it was real. It meant someone had access. It meant somebody could be hurt. I stepped through. The beam of my flashlight bounced over rough walls, uneven floor. This wasn't finished museum space anymore. This was the old section behind the exhibit. The part that led to the actual mine entrance that had been welded shut. My boots crunched on something gritty. Coal fragments, dust, maybe old gravel. The air felt colder against my face, not like outside cold, but like the kind that comes from underground. It made my skin tighten. I walked slowly, keeping one hand on the wall. My other hand held the flashlight out in front of me. The corridor slanted slightly down, and the museum door behind me looked too bright, too safe. Like an exit I might not reach fast enough if something went wrong. The footprints continued inside. Coal dust prints, the same tread pattern, steady and direct. Whoever made them didn't hesitate. They weren't stumbling. They were walking like they owned the place. "Hey!" I called again. "This area's closed. Come out now." My voice bounced back weird. Not a clean echo. More like it got absorbed, swallowed mid-sentence. It made my throat tighten. I followed the prints until the passage widened into a small chamber, and the beam of my flashlight landed on the welded door. It wasn't a door, really. It was a thick metal plate welded across the old mine mouth. Heavy, ugly work. You could see the seams where they'd burned the edges with a torch and fused it to the frame. It had been done to keep people out, to keep trouble sealed. And right in the middle of that plate was a whistle assembly. A real one, mounted to the metal like it belonged there, with a pipe running into the rock behind the plate. It looked industrial, old, like it had been part of the working mine. Except I'd been back here during training, years earlier, and I remembered nothing like that. The prince led straight to it. I stepped closer, light shaking in my hand now, and I saw something that made my stomach drop. Fresh cold dust on the whistle lever, like fingers had touched it. Not a smear from years ago. Fresh. I leaned in, and I noticed the welded seams around the plate weren't as solid as I remembered. There was a thin line, almost like a crack running along one edge. The weld had been cut. Recently. Someone had cut it and then re-welded it sloppy. My mouth went dry. That meant a person had been back here with equipment. A torch. Tools. Time. And nobody had told anyone. I heard a sound behind me, soft and slow. A foot dragging slightly. I spun around so fast the flashlight beam streaked across the walls. The passage behind me was empty. The coal dust footprints were still there, but now there were new marks beside them. Not shoe prints, bare footprints. Human, 'twas visible, pressed into the coal dust like someone had stepped down carefully. And those bare prints were smaller than mine. Narrow, like a teenager. Or a child. My skin went cold in a way I can't explain. Not because it was scary in a movie way. It was scary in a real way, because the mind tries to reject it. Bare feet down here, in coal dust, in a sealed mine corridor behind a museum. At 3:13 in the morning, I backed up until my shoulder hit the metal plate. My flashlight beam stayed fixed on those new footprints. I couldn't make myself look away, because if I did, I felt like something would move. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to talk like I was dealing with a frightened kid. "If this is a prank, it's not funny. You're going to get hurt. Come out, all right? I won't touch you. Just talk to me." The bare footprints took one more step. I didn't see a body. I didn't see legs. I just watched the dust compress, like an invisible foot pressed down and lifted away. Then the whistle lever moved. Right beside my head. The lever creaked down like someone pulled it with slow strength. The whistle screamed. Not distant now. Right there. Right in that chamber. The sound slammed into my ears, so hard my vision blurred. I shouted something, I don't even know what, and I clamped my hands over my ears, crouching instinctively. It felt like the air vibrated around me, like the whole stone space was ringing. When it stopped, the silence after was worse. My ears were ringing so badly, I could barely hear my own breathing. I stood up shaky, palms sweating, and my light landed on the bare footprints again. They were moving toward me now. One step, then another. Each print appearing right in front of my eyes in the coal dust. I backed away until my heel hit something, and I nearly fell. I looked down and realized I'd backed into the old track rail embedded in the floor. The flashlight beam shook. My breathing came fast. My chest felt like it was being squeezed. "Stop," I whispered. "Stop, please." The prints stopped, right in front of me. So close I could have stepped into them. And then slowly, coal dust began to rise from the floor. Not like smoke. Like it was being lifted by something breathing. A faint swirl, a trembling in the dust, as if air was moving in a pattern. Right where a person should have been standing, a shape formed, just barely, the outline of shoulders, A head. Not solid. Not visible like a ghost in a movie. More like the dust itself was outlining what it couldn't show. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink properly. My body locked up with fear, but my mind stayed sharp enough to understand one thing: this wasn't a prank. And it wasn't an animal, and it wasn't something I could talk down. The dust shape leaned toward me, and I heard a voice, not in the air, not through my ears. In my head, like a thought that didn't belong to me. Count. I shook my head violently. No, I'm leaving. Count. The bare footprints shifted again. One step closer, and the dust shape followed. I could feel the cold from it now, pressing against my face like I was standing too close to an open freezer. I stumbled backward, turned, and ran. I didn't try to be quiet. I didn't try to be careful. I sprinted back through the corridor, flashlight bouncing wildly, my boots slipping in cold grit. The museum door ahead looked impossibly far. My lungs burned. My throat felt raw. Behind me, the whistle blew again. 2 bursts, a signal, and then I heard footsteps running too. Not mine, not shoes. Bare feet slapping cold dust, keeping pace. Matching my speed like it was right behind me. I hit the museum door and burst out into the exhibit corridor. Bright emergency lights. Clean tiles. Safe air. I slammed the door shut behind me so hard the frame rattled. My hands fumbled for the padlocks. I dropped them twice, my fingers too clumsy from panic. The footsteps stopped on the other side of the door. Just stopped. No pounding, no rattling, no pushing. Like whatever was back there didn't need to force its way out. I managed to jam the hasp closed and snap both padlocks on without locking them. I didn't even care. I just needed the illusion of a barrier. I stumbled backward into the exhibit corridor, breathing hard, listening. Nothing. Then, from inside the sealed corridor behind the door, I heard the softest scrape of metal. Like welding. A slow, dragging sound, as if something was sealing the door again from the inside. I stood there frozen, tears in my eyes without realizing they'd started, because the sound was so calm, so methodical, like whatever was in there had done this before. Like it wasn't angry, it was finishing a task. I forced myself to move, to walk back to the front desk, to pick up the phone and call the sheriff. My hands shook so much, I dialed the wrong number twice. When I finally got through, my voice came out wrecked. "I need someone here now," I said. "Back wing. Mine exhibit. Something's wrong. Someone's been inside the sealed tunnel." The dispatcher asked my name, asked if I was hurt, asked if I saw anyone. I tried to explain. I couldn't. Not in a way that didn't sound insane. So I stuck to facts. "Footprints," I said. "Coal dust. And the locks were open. They shouldn't have been." They came fast. 2 deputies, flashlights, hands on their belts. They walked the corridor with me. I kept my eyes on that door the whole time. I kept expecting the whistle. But it didn't blow. One deputy tested the padlocks. He frowned. "These aren't even locked." I was trying, I said, and I hated how weak I sounded. They opened the door with me standing behind them, heart slamming, ready to bolt. The smell rolled out again. Damp stone. Old iron. We went in. The footprints were there. My boot prints and the coal dust prints leading inward. The deputies saw them too. Their faces changed when they realized it wasn't just dirt. It was deliberate. We reached the chamber. The welded plate was there. The whistle assembly was there. And the weld line I'd seen, where it looked cut and re-welded, was gone. Not patched, not repaired. Gone like it had never existed. The weld seam was solid all the way around, thick and clean, uniform, like it had been done by a professional years ago, and left untouched. I stared at it and felt my stomach flip. One deputy ran his light along the seam and nodded. "Looks solid. You sure you saw it cut?" "I'm telling you I did," I said. My voice broke again. "I saw the line. It was wrong. They checked everything else. No tools, no torch marks, no fresh metal, no sign anyone had been back there at all, except the cold dust footprints on the floor. The bare footprints were gone, like they never happened." The deputies escorted me back out, and one of them tried to be kind without saying it out loud. "You're alone in here all night?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Old places make noises," he said, like that explained any of it. "Could have been your mind filling gaps." I didn't argue, because I knew what I'd seen, and I knew how it sounded. They left after they took a report. I didn't finish my shift. I couldn't. I sat at the desk until daylight, staring at the monitor, waiting for the whistle. It never came again while I was there. 2 days later, the museum director called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable, like he was about to fire me, but didn't want to say it. "You're not in trouble," he said quickly. "But I need you to tell me exactly what you did that night." I told him. Everything I could. The whistle, the footprints, the locks opening, the chamber. His face went pale when I mentioned the time. "What time did you say?" he asked. 3:13 in the morning. He swallowed. His eyes flicked toward a file cabinet behind him, like he didn't want to look at me. That's when they used to signal shift change," he said quietly. I stared at him. "Who did?" "The miners," he said. "Back when the mine was active. 3:13 was the whistle. Always. Nobody knows why that time, but it became routine. Men set their watches by it." My mouth went dry again. Why would it blow now? He didn't answer right away. Then he sighed and opened the file cabinet. He pulled out an old binder, thick with yellowed papers. He flipped to a page and slid it across the desk toward me. It was an incident report, typed, dated 1980. I read it slowly. My hands started shaking again before I reached the end. There had been a collapse. A small crew trapped behind a rockfall near the old entrance corridor. Rescue attempts failed. The report listed names, ages, and a final note that made my stomach twist. Final whistle signal attempted at 3:13 in the morning. No response afterward. I looked up at him, throat tight. "How many were trapped?" He hesitated. "One of them was a boy," he said. 16. He lied about his age to work. The air in the room felt heavy. I thought about the bare footprints, the size, the toes pressed into cold dust, the way they ran behind me, keeping pace. I pushed the binder back like it burned. "So what?" I whispered. "He's still down there." The director's face tightened. "The area's sealed," he said carefully. "It's been sealed. We did what we could." I stood up, my chair scraping loud against the floor. "Then why did the locks open with my key?" His eyes went to my key ring hanging from my belt. "Your key ring," he said slowly, "was made from an old mine foreman's set. We keep the originals. The town, people donate things. The locksmith cut copies. I stared at him, my mouth slightly open, trying to make my brain accept it. A foreman's keys. A shift, change whistle at 3:13. Coal dust footprints that walked straight to a welded door, like someone was reporting for work. And a voice in my head telling me to count. Count what? I asked, barely a sound. The director looked at me with a kind of tired sadness that made my skin crawl more than any whistle. The missing, he said. The ones who never came out. People around here used to say if you hear that whistle, you don't run. You count names. You acknowledge them. I felt my stomach turn. That's not real. He didn't argue. He just watched me. I left that job the same day. I didn't even pack my things from the desk. I just walked out and drove until I couldn't see the museum sign anymore. But here's the part that still makes me feel sick when I say it out loud. A week later, a padded envelope showed up in my mailbox at my apartment. No return address. Just my name, handwritten like someone knew exactly where I lived. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly. No note, no threat, just a list of names. The names from that 1980 incident report. Every single one. And at the bottom, in darker ink, like it had been pressed harder into the paper, was one more name. Mine. I sat on my kitchen floor holding it, shaking so badly my teeth clicked. I tried to tell myself it was a prank. That someone at the museum was messing with me. That the director was part of it. That it was just small town cruelty. But I'd never told anyone about the voice. I'd never said the word count out loud to anyone. Not the deputies. Not the director. Not a friend. Not my own family. I burned that paper in the sink, watching the names curl and blacken. And for months afterward, every night at 3:13 in the morning, I'd wake up with the feeling that someone was standing right beside my bed, barefoot, patient, waiting for me to finally do what I should have done underground. Say the names. Count them. So they could stop trying to clock out. I nearly slipped into the creek because I was staring at the shoe like it was a living thing. It sat right in the shallow water at the bend, perfectly upright, toe pointing downstream, laces tied in a neat bow. The leather wasn't soaked. It wasn't muddy. It looked like somebody had just set it there and stepped back. Hey, watch your footing. Randy called from behind me. I didn't answer right away. My throat felt tight. I crouched and touched the side of the shoe with 2 fingers, expecting it to be cold and waterlogged. It was dry, bone dry. I lifted it and turned it over. The tread was clean, not a grain of grit stuck in it. The brand name stamped on the heel was one I recognized because my dad wore the same kind for yard work. Randy came up beside me, breathing hard from the climb. That ain't, he trailed off, eyes narrowing. That ain't been in the creek. No, I said. My voice came out thin. It hasn't. We were out there because 2 hikers hadn't come back. A couple from out of town. Late 20s maybe. Their car was still at the trailhead, and their friends had called it in after midnight when they stopped answering their phones. That kind of call always makes your stomach go heavy because you can pretend it's just a twisted ankle until it isn't. I was a volunteer search and rescue helper, which sounds braver than it is. Mostly I carried water, tracked along marked lines, listened for whistles, and tried not to slow everyone down. I'd helped with 2 searches before this one. Both ended with somebody found alive, embarrassed, dehydrated, grateful. This one already felt different. I held the shoe up to Randy. "Is this theirs?" He shook his head slowly. "Their friends said the girl had little trail runners. Bright color, like neon. That's a work boot." I looked back at the bend. The creek wasn't wide. It curved around a cluster of rocks and disappeared behind a wall of rhododendron. The water was shallow enough to step through if you wanted. Nothing about it looked like it could swallow people. But my skin was prickling like it could. Randy keyed his radio. We got a shoe. Single boot. Creek bend near marker 3. Static, then the team leader Lisa. Copy. Bag it. Photograph. Don't disturb anything else. I glanced at Randy. Don't disturb anything else. I repeated quietly, like it was a joke. Randy didn't laugh. I pulled an evidence bag from my pack, the kind we carried for exactly this reason. I slid the boot inside without letting it touch my clothes, sealed it, and kept staring at the water, waiting for another shoe to appear like a magic trick. We continued downstream in pairs. The rule was simple. Eyes on the ground, call out anything. I did what I always did, scanning for broken branches, scuffed dirt, candy wrappers, anything that looked wrong. Then I heard Alan behind me say, "You've got to be kidding." I turned and saw another shoe. This one was a hiking sneaker, gray with a red stripe. It rested on top of a rock like it belonged there, laces tied neatly, tongue tucked in. It wasn't wet either. It didn't even have creek smell. Alan picked it up with 2 fingers like it might bite him. "This is the kind she wore," he said, voice rough. My heart lurched. "You're sure?" He nodded without looking at me. Friend showed me a photo. Same brand, same color. Randy swore under his breath. "How's it clean?" Alan didn't answer. He just stared at the shoe and then stared at the water. That morning turned into a pattern that made me feel like I was going insane. Every time we reached a bend, a shoe was waiting. Not buried in silt, not tangled in debris, waiting. Placed. Clean and dry. The laces tied like someone cared. We found 5 shoes by noon. None of them matched the same person. Different sizes. Different styles. One tiny child sneaker with cartoon stars on the side. Lisa ordered us to stop collecting until the sheriff's office could send someone up to document everything properly. We backed out to the trail junction. Breathing hard, faces pale, hands shaking in ways nobody wanted to admit. The deputy who met us looked annoyed at first, like we were wasting his time. Then Randy opened the cooler we'd been using as a makeshift evidence box, and the deputy's expression changed so fast, it almost scared me more than the shoes. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Lisa kept her voice steady. "Found along the creek, all this morning. None wet, none dirty. One matches our missing hiker." The deputy leaned closer, sniffed like he expected creek stink. "These are clean," he said. "Somebody's messing with you." Alan snapped, sharp and ugly. "You think we're out here dragging boots into evidence bags for fun?" The deputy lifted a hand. All right. I'm saying it could be a person. Someone put these here." Lisa's eyes flicked to the creek behind him. "Then where are they getting them?" Nobody answered that. We didn't call it off. We couldn't. People were missing. We had daylight. We had dogs on standby and more volunteers arriving. But as the afternoon went on, something shifted inside me. The search stopped feeling like rescue and started feeling like we were being led. I noticed the shoes weren't random. They weren't scattered. They formed a line, each one placed just far enough apart to keep us moving downstream, like breadcrumbs. At one point, I whispered it to Randy. "Do you feel like we're following them?" He kept his eyes ahead, jaw clenched. "Don't say that." "I'm just saying." I said don't. We reached the biggest bend around late afternoon. The creek widened there, and the sound changed louder, more insistent, like it was pushing through a narrow throat. The path dipped, and the trees tightened in close. And on the bank, on a smooth flat rock like a display table, sat two shoes together, a pair. Grey hikers with the red stripe. Both clean, both dry. Both laces tied into identical bows. Alan made a sound like he'd been punched. He stepped forward, stumbled, caught himself. "That's her pair," he whispered. Lisa held an arm out to stop him. "Don't touch. Let the deputy document." Alan shook his head violently, eyes wet. "They're right there. They're right there, like she took them off." My stomach twisted, because that's what it looked like. A person sitting, taking off shoes, setting them neatly side by side. Except no socks, no pack, no phone, no signs of her at all. Randy's voice came low. "That ain't how people disappear." The deputy took photos, bagged the shoes. Then he looked up the creek, face tight. We follow. Slow. Eyes open. I didn't want to. I did anyway. We moved like we were walking towards something we already knew was waiting. Every few yards my brain tried to invent normal explanations. Prank, current, someone trying to help. But none of them survived the dry leather under my fingers. We rounded the bend, and the creek narrowed between two rock faces. The water ran deeper there. Darker. Not black, but dense, like it hid more than it showed. And at the edge, half on the rock, half over the water, was another shoe. A child's sneaker, the one with stars. It was perched toe out, like a little foot had slid off the edge. My breath caught so hard it hurt. My mind went to the wrong place instantly. A kid. A kid had been here. Not today, not in any report. But somewhere, sometime, a child had stepped onto this rock. Lisa's voice shook for the first time. Nobody said anything about a child missing. The deputy swallowed. "We have old cases. Lots of old cases." Randy's face went pale. "This creek, this is the one people used to talk about." Lisa turned sharply. "Talk about what?" Randy hesitated, then spoke like he hated himself for it. "Old folks used to say if you lose something in that water, it doesn't stay lost. It comes back when the creek wants to remind you." Alan snapped. "That's nonsense." But even as he said it, his eyes were fixed on the sneaker like it was accusing him. The dogs arrived right then, two handlers jogging down the trail. The German shepherd strained at the lead, eager, focused. I felt a burst of relief, because dogs don't do superstition. Dogs do scent and certainty. The handler crouched, held out a cloth from the missing hiker's car. Her jacket. The dog sniffed, then pulled toward the creek immediately, nails scraping rock. "It's got something," the handler said, voice sharp. "Right there." The dog leaned toward the water, and then it stopped. Just stopped dead, like an invisible wall went up. Its ears flattened. It backed away, whining, tail tucked. The handler frowned. "What's wrong with you?" The dog refused. It pulled away hard, choking itself on the harness to get distance. I'd never seen that before. Not fear, not distraction. Refusal. The second dog did the same thing. That's when I felt the first real wave of dread crawl up my spine. Not excitement. Not adrenaline. Dread. The kind that makes you feel like you shouldn't be present for what's about to happen. Lisa turned to the deputy. We need to expand. Check both banks. We don't cross here without a plan. The deputy nodded, but his eyes never left the water. Agreed. We spread out along the rocks, scanning, searching for any sign of the hikers. Alan kept calling her name, voice cracking, calling into the trees like she could answer. But the only response was the creek. Then, softly, I heard something else. A click, like a shoelace aglet tapping stone. I turned my head. It came again. Click, click, click. I followed the sound to a spot just upstream. There was a flat rock ledge, damp with spray. And sitting on it was a shoe I hadn't seen before. A single men's boot. Brown leather. Clean. Dry. Laces tied. The deputy's eyes widened. That's the guy's, he said, voice tight. That's the missing boyfriend's boot. Lisa took a sharp breath. How is that possible? Because we hadn't found his shoes. We'd found a random boot and a child's sneaker and other scattered pairs. But not his. And now it was here, like it had been waiting for the right moment. Alan stepped forward without thinking. No, that means they're close. That means they were here. That means stop, Lisa snapped, grabbing his arm. Don't go near the edge, or Alan ripped free. She's down there, he screamed, and his voice broke into something raw. She has to be. He took one more step, and the rock under his boot shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a movie slip. It was the subtle betrayal of wet stone. His heel slid, his weight went wrong, and he pinwheeled his arms. I lunged forward on instinct, but I was too far. Alan hit the water with a hard splash and disappeared under the surface so fast I didn't even understand what I'd seen. 1 second, he was yelling. The next, he was gone. The handler shouted, "Man over!" Randy surged forward, and Lisa grabbed his jacket to keep him from jumping in. I ran to the edge, heart hammering, eyes scanning the water. "Alan!" I screamed. "Alan!" Nothing, no flailing, no head popping up, no gasp for air. Just rippling water and the sound of the creek rolling on like it hadn't noticed. The deputy dropped to his knees, reaching with his arm, but the current tugged at his sleeve. He pulled back, face white. "Throw a rope." Randy sprinted to his pack. The rope came out in a tangled mess, hands clumsy with panic. We threw it. We threw it again. We threw it into water that didn't give anything back. And then I saw it. A shoe surfaced downstream. Alan's shoe, clean, dry, laces tied. It floated like a gift. I screamed and stumbled back, almost falling, because my mind snapped in 2 directions at once. Alan had just gone under. His shoe should have been gone with him, soaked. But it was there, perfect, waiting. The deputy stared at it, eyes wide, mouth open. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not." Lisa's voice shook. "Get everyone back. Now." Randy grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. "Move," he snapped. We backed away from the creek like it was a living animal. The dogs still whined and pulled to leave. The handler didn't fight them. Alan's shoe bumped gently against the rock at the bank. Tap, 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 like it was knocking. The deputy walked forward like he couldn't help himself. Lisa stepped into his path. "Don't." He looked at her, eyes bloodshot. "We can't leave him." Lisa's face crumpled for half a second, then hardened. "We're not leaving him. We're calling in divers. Professionals, with lines and gear. We're not feeding this creek another body." That sentence hung in the air, ugly and true. It took hours for the divers to arrive, and by the time they did, the light was fading and everyone was exhausted and scared in that quiet, humming way people get when they've stared at something too long. The divers went in with ropes anchored to trees, slow and careful. They searched the pool. They searched the narrow cut between rocks. They came up again and again, shaking their heads. No body. No trace. Just the creek continuing on like it always had. They recovered the shoes, bagging them with gloves, not looking at them too long. The deputy stared at the evidence bags like they were insults. When we finally left the trail, nobody spoke on the way down. Even Alan's friends, who'd been waiting at the command point, didn't scream anymore. They just stood there in shock, eyes empty, as if their minds refused to accept the math of what had happened. I went home with creek water drying on my pants from kneeling at the edge. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could turn the key, staring at my own shoes like they might betray me too. That night, I scrubbed my hands until my skin turned red. I couldn't get the feeling of dry leather out from under my fingertips. Clean, tied, returned. A week later, the sheriff's office called the volunteers in for a debrief. They told us the official line: Alan had slipped into a dangerous current. The hikers likely did too. Searches would continue. No mention of the shoes. But the deputy pulled me aside after. His face looked older. "You found the first one," he said quietly. "The boot." "Yeah," I whispered. He nodded once, like confirming something to himself. "My granddad was a deputy here. He had a file. Unofficial. People who went missing near that bend. You know what he wrote at the end?" I shook my head, throat tight. He looked me dead in the eyes. He wrote, "The creek gives back what it can carry. It keeps what it wants." I felt my stomach drop. Did he ever figure out why? The deputy's jaw tightened. He said the only way a body came back was if someone went in after it and brought it out. And even then what? He swallowed. Even then the creek took a shoe. I didn't answer because I couldn't. 2 mornings after that, I opened my front door and my breath stopped. On my welcome mat, perfectly scented, sat my own left shoe. Clean. Dry laces tied in a neat bow, like someone had taken the time. I stared at it for a long moment. And then I did the only thing I could think to do that might keep me alive. I grabbed my other shoe from inside, carried both to my car, and drove straight to the sheriff's office. I placed them on the counter in front of the deputy who'd spoken to me, my hands shaking so badly the shoes bumped together. "I'm done," I said. "I'm not going back out there. Ever." He looked at the shoes, then at me, and I saw something like relief flicker in his eyes. He didn't ask questions. He didn't laugh. He just nodded once, slow and firm, like he understood the rule I'd finally learned. When the creek starts returning shoes, it isn't asking for help. It's counting. The bell rang so loud it made me drop the pry bar, and the sound echoed through the empty church like it had always belonged there. I froze with one knee on the scaffold plank, heart jumping straight into my throat, trying to figure out how a bell could be ringing in a building that had never had one. "Did you hear that?" I shouted down. Earl's voice came back from the nave, flat and annoyed. "Hear what? The bell?" I said, from up here. Silence. Then the scrape of his boots on old wood. "There ain't no bell," he said. "This place never had a tower." "You know that." I did know that. I'd read every scrap of paperwork we had before starting the renovation. The church was small, built cheap in the 1920s. No tower, no steeple, no bell. Just a squat wooden box with a pitched roof and an attic nobody bothered with, because there was nothing up there except dust and old wiring. The bell rang again, slower this time. One heavy toll that made my chest vibrate. Earl stopped talking. I climbed down off the scaffold without thinking, my hands slick with sweat. The sound had come from above us, right over the choir loft. I could still feel it humming in my bones. "You heard that," I said when I reached him. Earl stared up at the ceiling, jaw tight. "Yeah." We stood there listening, the air between us thick and stale. I waited for another ring. It didn't come. The quiet after was worse, like the building was holding its breath. "You want me to check the attic?" I asked, even though every part of me hoped he'd say no. Earl scratched his beard. Probably a loose beam or something settling. "Still, we should look. Insurance'll have our asses if something's up there." The attic access was a narrow pool, down ladder behind the altar. I hated ladders even on good days, and this one groaned like it resented being touched. I climbed first because I always did. Being trans in a job like this meant you learned early not to hesitate. Hesitation invited commentary. The attic smelled like old paper and mouse droppings. My headlamp beam cut through floating dust, catching on exposed rafters and forgotten boxes. It was tighter than I remembered from the inspection photos, the roof sloping down fast on either side. And right in the middle, hanging from a thick rope tied over a beam, was a bell. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a basketball, dark metal, worn smooth in places like it had been handled a lot. The rope ran down from the beam, through a simple pulley, and ended near the floor where someone could pull it. Except the end of the rope wasn't there anymore. It had been cut. Fresh. Fibers splayed and pale, the end still swinging slightly like it hadn't settled yet. My mouth went dry. "Earl," I said softly, "you need to come see this." He climbed up behind me, muttering under his breath, until his headlamp beam landed on the bell. He went very still. "What the hell?" he said. "I told you," I whispered. "There's a bell." He reached out and steadied the rope with 2 fingers. It was still moving, slow and gentle, like someone had let go moments before we came up. "This wasn't here yesterday," he said. "No," I agreed. "And nobody's been up here but us." We stood there too long, both of us thinking the same thing and not wanting to say it. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Earl finally cleared his throat. "You see where that rope goes?" I followed the line of it over the beam and into shadow. "Yeah." "Anything else up here?" I scanned the attic more carefully. That's when I noticed the footprints. They weren't in dust. There wasn't enough dust for that. They were scuffed marks on the bare planks, heel to toe, leading from the far corner to the bell rope. Adult-sized, barefoot. My stomach flipped. "Earl," I said again. "There's someone else been up here." He swore quietly and reached for his phone. "I'm calling the sheriff." The bell rang. It rang right between us, hard and sudden, like an invisible hand had grabbed it and yanked. The sound was deafening in the cramped space. I screamed and stumbled back, hitting the sloped roof with my shoulder. The rope whipped violently, even though the cut end never touched anything. Earl shouted something I couldn't hear over the ringing. Then it stopped. The rope slowed, fibers brushing my arm as it swung. I stared at it, chest heaving, my brain scrambling for a rational explanation that wouldn't come. "There's no wind," I said. "There's no mechanism." Earl's face had gone pale under his beard. "We're leaving," he said. "Right now?" We climbed down fast, nearly tripping over each other. The moment my boots hit the church floor, I felt like I could breathe again. Earl locked the doors even though we were the only ones with keys. "I'm not staying," he said. "You shouldn't either." "I'll help you pack up," I said, still shaky. I didn't want to be alone. We were halfway through shutting down the generator when the bell rang again. This time it came from above the sanctuary, clear and strong, like it was meant to be heard across the valley. Earl and I both froze. "That's impossible," he whispered. The bell rang a second time, then a third, slow, deliberate. I felt something cold settle in my gut. "Earl," I said. "Someone's pulling it." "No," he said automatically. The rope's cut. Another ring. Louder. Earl grabbed a flashlight. "Stay here." "I'm not letting you go alone." I snapped, fear sharpening my voice. He hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but stay behind me." We didn't bother with the ladder this time. We ran for the stairs to the small loft above the entrance, the only other access point to the attic space. The ringing continued, each toll spaced evenly, like counting. When we pushed open the loft door, the sound stopped. The attic was lit now, not by our headlamps, but by a lantern sitting on the floor beneath the bell. A real lantern, old, fashioned, glass glowing warm. And standing beneath the bell was a person. They were barefoot, like the footprints. Thin, wrapped in an oversized coat that looked decades old. Their head was tilted slightly, like they were listening to something we couldn't hear. Earl shouted. "Hey, get away from that!" The person turned. I won't pretend they looked like a ghost. They looked like a human being. That somehow made it worse. Their face was slack, eyes unfocused, mouth moving silently like they were reciting something. They reached up and grabbed the rope. I shouted, "Don't!" even though it was already too late. They pulled. The bell rang once, violently, and the beam above it creaked. Dust rained down. The person let go of the rope and stumbled back, eyes finally focusing on us. "Too many," they said hoarsely. "Too many and nobody rang." Earl stepped forward. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" The person laughed, a wet, broken sound. "I was invited." "By who?" I asked. They looked at me then, really looked, eyes sharp and suddenly aware. "By the bell," they said. "It needs to be rung." Earl lunged for them. The person bolted, darting past us into the darker end of the attic. I heard the crack of wood as they stepped somewhere they shouldn't have. Then a scream. It was short, cut off abruptly. Earl and I ran toward the sound. Flashlights bouncing wildly. We found them at the far corner where the floorboards had given way. The lantern lay shattered nearby. There was a hole where the boards had collapsed. No body, just darkness below. Earl dropped to his knees, shining his light down. "Jesus," he breathed. It's a drop." I leaned over, heart hammering. The beam caught on something metal embedded in the stone foundation beneath the church. A hook. An old iron hook bolted into the rock, and beneath it, coiled neatly on the dirt floor, was the other half of the bell rope. Cleanly cut. The sheriff came. So did the fire department. They searched beneath the church and found a crawl space leading into the hillside. It was full of personal items. Shoes, coats, old wallets. A stack of obituaries clipped from newspapers, some going back decades. The bell, they told us later, had come from a church upriver that burned down in the 1960s. It had disappeared during cleanup. The person in the attic was never found. The official story said squatter. Mental illness. A tragic accident. But here's the part I don't tell people unless I trust them. When the building inspector came to clear the site a week later, he called me over. "Funny thing," he said, pointing at the attic beam. "That bell rope, it's been up there a long time. See the wear marks? Decades at least." "That's impossible," I said. "We would have seen it." He shrugged. Wood remembers weight. Even when the rope's gone. I quit that job. Earl did too. The church never reopened. They tore it down quietly the next year. Sometimes, late at night, I wake up with the sound of a bell in my ears, ringing slow and steady, like it's waiting for someone to answer. And every time, I'm grateful I never learned what happens when nobody does. The bus hissed and jerked to a stop so hard my forehead almost bumped the seat in front of me. And I grabbed the metal bar on instinct like I was bracing for a crash. The gravel lot outside the window was empty. Just pale stones and weeds, and a split in the trees like a mouth. I leaned into the glass, confused, because we weren't supposed to stop here. We never stopped here. "Everybody stay seated," Mr. Hensley said, voice tight. I looked down the aisle. Kids were already craning their necks, whispering. My stomach felt weird, like when you miss a step on stairs and your body thinks you're falling. "Who's getting on?" A 7th grader named Cody called out. Mr. Hensley didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead with both hands on the wheel. Knuckles pale. He was the kind of driver who joked with everybody, who called us buddy and sweetheart, and tossed out peppermint candies around Christmas. Seeing him sit like that, silent, made the whole bus feel wrong. I slid my hand to the bright orange safety patrol belt around my waist, the one I wore because Mrs. Hackett said I was responsible. My job was to help the little kids cross the road at school, keep them from running off the curb. It made me feel important. That morning it made me feel like a target. The door stayed shut. After a few seconds, Mr. Hensley opened it anyway. The folding doors wheezed apart, and cold air rushed in carrying the smell of wet leaves and dirt. Nobody climbed the steps. Cody laughed nervously. "Ain't nobody there." Mr. Hensley's voice finally came, rough like he'd swallowed sand. "This stop's always been here." A couple kids laughed, but it died fast when nobody else joined in. "What stop?" I blurted out before I could stop myself. We don't stop here. Mr. Hensley looked at me in the mirror. His eyes didn't look angry. They looked tired. You sure about that? He asked softly. I didn't answer because my throat suddenly felt too small. He shut the door and pulled back onto the road. The bus rolled on, tires crunching gravel, and the lot disappeared behind the trees like it had never been there. All the way to school, everyone talked at once. You saw it, right? Why'd he open the door? Maybe he got lost. My grandma said there's old logging roads back there. I didn't talk. I kept seeing the empty lot in my mind, and the way the trees opened around it, not like a driveway, but like something that expected company. At school, I told Mrs. Hackett because that's what I was supposed to do. Safety patrol told adults when something was wrong. She didn't even look up from her clipboard. Bus routes don't just change, she said. You probably weren't paying attention. I was paying attention. I insisted. Mr. Hensley stopped. He opened the door. She sighed like I was making her late for something. Then asked him after school. So I did. That afternoon, I waited until the bus was almost empty. Mr. Hensley was filling out his little log sheet, pencil moving slow. I stood at the bottom of the steps with my backpack straps tight in my fists. Mr. Hensley, I said. He didn't look up. Yeah, kiddo. Where was that stop this morning? My voice shook even though I didn't want it to. His pencil stopped. He stared at the paper like he'd forgotten what it was. Then he looked at me, and something about his face made me wish I'd stayed quiet. You mean the gravel lot, he said. Yeah, he swallowed. It's always been on my sheet, but it's not on ours, I said, and immediately felt stupid. Like I was telling a grown man how his job worked. Mr. Hensley's eyes flicked to the steps behind me, like he was checking if anyone else was listening. Then he lowered his voice. I don't remember it being there last week, he admitted. But it's there now. And when I look at my route list, it says it's always been there. My stomach dropped. So you know it's new. He sighed and rubbed his face. Don't talk about it, all right? Just stay seated if we stop. Don't get off. Don't tell the other kids to mess around. I stared at him. Why? He hesitated too long. Because, he said finally, I got a bad feeling. That night, I tried to tell my mom. She was tired, stirring beans on the stove, barely looking at me. Probably a turnaround, she said. Bus drivers do that if they're ahead of schedule. He opened the door, I said. Like someone was supposed to get on. The mom waved her spoon. Then someone missed the bus. But nobody was there, I said louder. Mom's face tightened the way it did when she wanted the conversation to end. Baby, you're working yourself up. Go do your homework. I went to my room, but I didn't do homework. I sat on my bed with my shoes still on, listening to the house creak, imagining the bus sitting in that empty lot with the door open, waiting. The next morning, I watched the road like it was going to bite me. The bus picked me up the same as always. Kids talked about normal stuff, lunch, tests, who liked who. Nobody mentioned the extra stop because it felt like the kind of thing that disappeared if you didn't name it. Then the bus slowed. My heart immediately started pounding. I knew before I saw it. The gravel lot appeared between the trees again, like a hidden room. Mr. Hensley pulled in without hesitation this time. He stopped in the exact same place. The bus hissed. "Stay seated," he said, voice flat. The door opened. Empty steps, empty air, the smell of wet leaves. But this time, I saw something that made my skin go cold. Footprints. Tiny footprints in the gravel at the edge of the lot, right where the bus door faced. Like a kid had been standing there waiting. The prints were small, smaller than mine. They weren't fresh like mud, but gravel scuffs, toes angled inward like nervous feet. And beside them was something else. A second set of tiny footprints, right next to the first. Same size, same stance. Like someone was waiting with them. I pressed my forehead against the window, breath fogging the glass. My hands were shaking. My stomach felt like it was filling with water. Cody noticed me staring. "What?" he whispered, leaning over. "Nothing." I lied immediately, because I didn't want anyone else looking. I didn't want anyone else seeing what I was seeing, like the footprints would disappear if I kept them to myself. Mr. Hensley stared ahead, both hands on the wheel again. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see it working. Nobody climbed on. Nobody moved outside. But the footprints stayed there, waiting. The door shut. The bus rolled out. I watched the footprints vanish behind the trees, and something in me knew we hadn't left them behind. It felt like they came with us. At school, I couldn't focus. Every time a teacher called on me, my brain lagged like I was underwater. At recess, I stood near the fence and stared toward the woods, even though you couldn't see them from the playground. Cody cornered me by the water fountain. "You saw something," he said. "No, I didn't," I snapped, too fast. He grinned, mean and excited. "You did. Was it like a body?" "Shut up," I hissed. He leaned closer. "My cousin said there's a place out past the ridge where kids used to get taken. Like back in the old days. He said they called it a collecting place." I felt my stomach twist. "You're lying." Cody shrugged. "You can ask him." I didn't want to ask anyone anything. I wanted the stop to disappear. I wanted Mr. Hensley to just drive past it like it was nothing. But on the third morning, the bus didn't just stop. It waited. Mr. Hensley pulled into the lot and turned the engine off. The bus went quiet except for the ticking sound it makes when it's cooling down. The kids started murmuring, scared now. "What's he doing?" Someone whispered. The door opened with a loud sigh. Cold air rushed in again, and then I heard it. A small sound, not a voice, not a cough. A soft scuffing on gravel, like feet moving closer. My heart slammed so hard it made my ears ring. I stared at the door. Nothing came up, but the steps creaked. One slow creak, like someone had put weight on the first step. I couldn't breathe. Mr. Hensley didn't look back. He stared straight ahead, face gray. "Mr. Hensley," I whispered, barely a sound. "Close the door." He didn't move. The steps creaked again, higher this time, like the invisible weight had climbed another step. Cody started to laugh, but it came out shaky. "Stop messing around," he called, trying to sound tough. "I know it's you, Trevor." Nobody answered. The bus door stayed open. Then, right in the middle of the empty air at the entrance, something hit the floor with a dull tap. A small backpack. It was a kid's backpack, faded blue with a cartoon dinosaur on it. It landed on the bus floor like it had been dropped by an invisible hand. Every kid froze. I stared at it, my skin crawling. The backpack was old, stained, the straps frayed like it had been dragged over rocks. Mr. Hensley finally moved. His hand twitched on the wheel. "No," he whispered. The backpack zipper was open, and something slid out onto the floor. A laminated name tag. The kind the elementary school used on field trips. I leaned forward and my breath caught hard. The name tag had a picture of a little boy, smiling with missing front teeth. The name underneath was readable even from my seat. It was my name. I swear to you, I felt my whole body go numb, like I'd been unplugged. Cody sucked in a breath. What the? I didn't hear the rest because my ears were roaring. My eyes locked on that name tag like it was a gun pointed at my chest. Mr. Hensley's voice cracked through the silence. "Nobody moves," he said. "Louder now. Nobody gets off. Nobody touches it." But I couldn't stop staring because my brain was trying to make it make sense. My school didn't even use those tags anymore. We hadn't since I was in second grade. How could it be there? How could it have my face? The steps creaked again, and then a child's voice whispered from the open doorway. Soft, close. "Your turn." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the voice of a kid my age, calm like they were inviting me to play. My stomach flipped. "Mr." Hensley slammed his foot on the brake, even though we weren't moving, and threw the bus into gear. The engine roared back to life like it was being forced awake. The door was still open. "Close," he shouted, and the pneumatic doors started to fold inward. But as they began to shut, I saw it. Just for a second. Two small hands on the outside rail of the steps, pale, dirty, knuckles bruised. And behind them, a child's face in the trees, watching, eyes wide and empty, like they'd forgotten how to blink. The doors snapped shut. Mr. Hensley floored it. Kids screamed. Some cried. Someone threw up. Cody went quiet, his tough act dead. The bus bounced back onto the road, and the lot disappeared behind the trees again. We made it to school in complete silence, except for sobs and the sound of the bus rattling. Mr. Hensley pulled into the loop like normal, and then he didn't open the doors. He just sat there shaking, hands still on the wheel. Lisa, the principal, came out, confused. "What is going on?" Mr. Hensley finally stood up. His legs wobbled. He held up the name tag in his hand. He must have picked it up when nobody was looking. Or maybe he couldn't leave it on the floor. His voice broke when he spoke. "This stop isn't on my route," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. It wasn't, and I'm not driving it again. The principal stared. "What stop?" Mr. Hensley pointed back the way we'd come, like he could point straight through the woods to it. "The one that keeps trying to take a kid. My mom came to the school that day because they called parents. They asked questions. They checked my records. They acted like it was a prank or a panic. They made Mr. Hensley take a drug test. They said maybe someone broke in and planted the backpack. But nobody could explain how a name tag with my picture from years ago ended up on a bus floor in an empty lot that supposedly didn't exist. The next day, there was a new driver. The bus route changed. We never went near that road again. Months passed. The fear dulled. People stopped talking about it. But I didn't forget the footprints. 2 sets, waiting. Because I found out the truth later, and it made me sick in a way I can't describe. My grandmother finally told me, after I begged her and cried, and wouldn't let it go. When she was a girl, A school bus went missing in these woods. Not crashed, not found, just gone. A whole bus of kids and a driver. Like the mountains swallowed them. The state covered it up fast, called it a runaway driver, a made-up story, anything to stop panic. But locals remembered. They said, if you drove the wrong road at the wrong time, the bus might come back looking for the kids it never delivered. And it would add a stop for the one it still needed, me. I was halfway through sorting the bundles when Mr. Peck slapped a stack of envelopes onto my table and said, "These don't exist." I looked up from the trays, fingers still pinching rubber bands. What? He tapped the top envelope with the back of his knuckle. Dead road mail. Again. Third day in a row. The handwriting on the front was neat and old-fashioned, all loops and careful spacing, like the sender had taken their time. The return address line was blank. The destination address made my stomach dip the second I read it. Coldwater Hollow Road. Except Coldwater Hollow Road didn't exist anymore. It hadn't since the landslide. Everybody in Grundy knew that. The mountain had come down in one ugly rush years before, burying the road under mud and broken trees. The county put up a barricade, then stopped maintaining it, and eventually the maps just erased it like it had never been there. I stared at the envelope, then at Mr. Peck. How'd it get in the stream? He shrugged like it offended him. It showed up with the outgoing, like it was always there. I picked it up. The paper was dry. Not damp, not stained, not smudged. The stamp looked normal. Cancel mark clean. It smelled faintly like dust and something metallic, like pennies in a jar. Maybe somebody's messing around, I said, trying to make it sound casual. Mr. Peck's eyes narrowed. Nobody's got time for that. And nobody drives up there. I didn't argue because he was right. I was the assistant, the extra hands on the rural roads. I ran parcels, did box checks, helped Mr. Peck finish in time. I wasn't even supposed to touch weird stuff like this without telling him. But I couldn't stop staring at the address. Coldwater Hollow Road, like it was calling me stupid for thinking it was dead. Put it in undeliverable, I said. Mr. Peck snorted. I tried. It keeps coming back. I laughed because it sounded ridiculous. What do you mean it comes back? He leaned closer like he didn't want anyone else hearing. I threw it in the dead bin with the rest. Next morning it was in my tray again. Same stack. Same order. The fluorescent light above us buzzed softly. The whole building felt suddenly too quiet. I swallowed. Open one. Mr. Peck stared at me like I'd asked him to rob a bank. We don't open mail. I know, I said, voice low. But this is wrong. If someone's sending stuff to a road that isn't there, something's off. He hesitated, then shook his head. No. You open it, if you want that on your conscience. I held the envelope in my hand, feeling its weight like it carried more than paper. My fingers slid under the flap without me fully deciding. I tore it gently, heart pounding, and pulled out a single folded sheet. The handwriting inside matched the outside. Tight, careful lines. Do not take the curve by the flooded ditch past the mill. The truck will slide, and the fence post will take the left headlight. The boy will cry. Nobody will die, but the blood will scare him. I stared at it so long the words blurred. Mr. Peck watched my face change. What does it say? I held it out without speaking. His eyes scanned the page. His expression shifted from annoyed to confused to something that looked like fear, even though he tried to hide it. "That's," he started. "That's our route," I whispered. He swallowed hard. "That curve is real, and the ditch is flooded." It was yesterday. I looked at the clock on the wall. We still had hours before we'd be out near that stretch. My skin prickled. "It's a prank," Mr. Peck said. "Too fast. Somebody heard me complain about that ditch. That's all." But he didn't tear the paper. He didn't throw it away. We drove the route anyway, because that's what you do. You don't skip deliveries because you read something creepy. You don't tell your boss you're scared of a letter. I sat in the passenger seat of the mail truck with the paper in my pocket, folded tight. "Mr. Peck drove like he always did, one hand on the wheel, the other flicking through bundles as we stopped at boxes. Neither of us mentioned the letter again until we got close to the mill. The road narrowed there, hugging a slope on one side and a drop on the other. The ditch was swollen with muddy water, exactly like the letter said. The curve ahead was sharp and blind. Mr. Peck slowed down. He didn't have to. He did anyway. "You see that fence post?" I asked quietly. "Yeah," he muttered. My heart beat harder with every yard. The curve came up. "Mr. Peck eased the wheel, careful, cautious, and then a kid ran out into the road. Not from the ditch, not from the slope, from nowhere. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7, sprinting across like he didn't see the truck at all. Mr. Peck slammed the brake. The truck lurched. Tires skidded on wet gravel. We didn't hit the boy. But the truck slid anyway, exactly like the letter said, drifting toward the ditch with this awful, slow inevitability. The left headlight clipped the fence post with a crunch of glass and metal. I sucked in a breath so hard it hurt. The boy stopped on the other side of the road, staring at us. He didn't look scared. He looked like he was waiting for something. Then he opened his mouth and started screaming. Not words, just raw crying, loud and panicked, like he'd been hurt. Mr. Peck threw the truck into park and jumped out, swearing.
"Kid!"
"Are you all right?" The boy stumbled backward into the trees, crying harder. I sat frozen, fingers digging into my jeans. My mouth was dry. My chest felt too tight. Mr. Peck came back to the door, face pale. "He's gone," he said. He ran off. I forced myself to speak. "Nobody died." He stared at me like I'd slapped him. "What?" I pulled the letter out with shaking hands and pointed to the last line. "Nobody will die." It felt wrong saying it out loud, like I was confirming a deal. Mr. Peck's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "That letter," he whispered. "That letter knew. The rest of the day, we didn't talk about anything else. Every time we stopped at a box, I felt like something was watching from the woods. Every time a car came around a bend, my stomach knotted. Back at the post office, Mr. Peck dumped the rest of the cold water, hollow envelopes onto my table like they were poisonous. "Don't open them," he said immediately, then stopped himself. "No, open them. We need to know." I tore into the next one, hands trembling. "Do not take the bridge by the old quarry afternoon. The boards will snap. The dog will go first. You will hear the leash scrape the wood." My mouth went cold. Mr. Peck's voice went hoarse. "My sister's dog. She walks him near that quarry." I opened another. "Tell Linda not to stand too close to the stove. The grease will flash when she turns her head. Her right forearm will blister. She will pretend she is fine. Mr. Peck's eyes widened. Linda's my wife. I opened a third. The little red car will stall at the intersection by the dollar store. The truck behind it will not stop. The horn will last too long. The man in the red car will survive, but his jaw will not be right again. My hands shook so badly the paper rattled. These are warnings. A Mr. Peck stared at the stack like it was alive. From who? I didn't have an answer. None of the envelopes had return addresses. None of them had postmarks that made sense if they came from somewhere real. Some had cancellations that looked faded, like they'd been stamped decades ago. Mr. Peck grabbed the phone and called his wife. I heard him trying to sound normal and failing. "Linda," he said, voice tight, "don't fry anything tonight. Just don't, please." He listened, eyes darting to the letters. "No, it's not a joke. Just do it." He hung up, hands shaking. I called my mom. I told her not to take the bridge by the quarry if she went into town. She laughed at first, then stopped when she heard my voice. "Baby, what's wrong?" she asked. "I can't explain," I said. "Just promise me." She promised, annoyed but serious enough to say it. Then the phone rang in the post office. It was the sheriff's office. "Mr. Peck," answered. His face drained as he listened. When he hung up, he didn't speak for a second. Then he whispered. "There was a wreck by the dollar store. Red car got hit from behind. Guy's alive. Bad injuries." The words landed heavy and final. My stomach rolled. "Did the horn?" I started. Mr. Peck nodded slowly, eyes wide. "Witness said the truck driver laid on the horn the whole time, like he was stuck." I stared at the letters in my hands. It didn't feel like we were preventing anything. It felt like we were being informed. That night I didn't sleep. I kept seeing the little boy in the road, the way he screamed like he was performing, like it was scripted. I drove to the barricade for cold water, Hollow Road, the next morning before my shift, because I couldn't help myself. The road was blocked by concrete barriers and a sagging sign that said Rauaid Silosid. Beyond it, trees and mud, and the old slope that had collapsed. But something new was there. A mailbox. It stood just past the barrier, planted in the gravel like it had been there forever. A plain black mailbox on a wooden post. The red flag was up. My heart pounded. I got out of my car slowly, like the mailbox might move. I walked closer, shoes crunching gravel. The box had no number, no name, just blank metal and a closed lid. I reached out and lifted it. Inside was a stack of envelopes, all addressed to me, my full name, spelled correctly, no return addresses. My hands went numb. I pulled one out trembling and opened it right there beside the barricade. "You will come here because you cannot stop yourself. You will stand where the road ends, and you will look for the beginning. Do not go past the barrier. The ground is hungry there. It remembers your father's boots." My breath caught. My father had worked construction. He'd worn heavy boots. He'd died when I was a kid. Not in a landslide, but in a job accident I didn't like thinking about. My knees went weak. I tore open another envelope. "You think we are helping. We are counting. Every warning delivered is one more name remembered. The road does not want to be forgotten." My throat tightened. My eyes burned. I opened a third envelope. "Today you will try to stop the next one. You will fail if you act like a hero." Tell Mr. Peck to turn back at the flooded ditch again. Tell him he must not get out of the truck when the boy appears. The boy is not lost. He is a marker. I stood there, shaking in the cold morning air, feeling like I'd stepped into something bigger than my life. At the post office, Mr. Peck took one look at my face and said, "You went up there." "There's a mailbox," I whispered. "Past the barricade." His jaw clenched. I knew it. I shoved the letter at him. "It says if we get out of the truck when the boy appears, we fail. Mr. Thayer." Peck's eyes flicked across the words. "Fail what?" "I don't know," I said, voice breaking. "But it said the boy isn't lost. He's a marker." Mr. Peck's hands tightened into fists. "We're not driving the route today," he said suddenly. "Why can't just—" "Where can?" he snapped. "I'm done playing along." He marched to the supervisor's desk and told him the truck was damaged and the road needed coverage. The supervisor grumbled. Another carrier took it. Mr. Peck and I stayed behind, both of us pretending we were fine while our nerves chewed through us. Around noon, the sheriff's office called again. There'd been another accident at the flooded ditch curve. But this time, it was worse. The substitute carrier had gotten out of the truck to check the damage. Witnesses said a child screamed from the tree line, and when the carrier stepped toward the sound, the ground near the ditch gave way. The edge collapsed. The carrier fell hard and hit his head on the fence post. He was alive, but barely. I felt my stomach drop through the floor. "Mr. Peck stared at the phone after he hung up, eyes glassy. "It wanted him," he whispered. "Not us." The truth settled into me like cold mud. The letters weren't trying to save people. They were trying to keep the sequence intact. To make sure the right person got hurt in the right place, so the road's memory stayed fed. That afternoon, Mr. Peck drove with me back to the barricade. He walked up to the mailbox like he was walking to an execution. The red flag was up again. He opened it. More letters. He pulled them out, flipped through them, face tightening. Then he looked at me, voice barely holding. "It's not done," he said. "It's just changed the target." I swallowed hard. "To who?" And Mr. Peck held out the top envelope. My name was on it again. And beneath it, in the corner, in small, neat handwriting, was the dead road's address. Coldwater Hollow Road. Like it was inviting me to step past the barrier and become the next accident it could remember. I didn't do it. I quit that day. I left the post office keys on the supervisor's desk and walked out without explaining, because there was no way to explain it without sounding insane. Mr. Peck retired early. The mailbox disappeared a week later, according to the sheriff. The barricade stayed. The road stayed dead. But every once in a while, I still check my own mailbox with my heart pounding, because I'm terrified I'll find a clean, dry envelope with no return address and a warning written like a promise. And if that ever happens again, I'm not sure I'll be strong enough not to follow it back to where the road ends. Bear planted his front paws on the hallway runner and locked up like someone had yanked an invisible leash. His ears went back, his tail dropped, and the low noise in his throat wasn't a growl so much as a warning he didn't want to make. "Come on, Bear," I whispered, tugging the rope toy in my hand. "It's just the back room." He didn't move. He stared at the closed spare room door like it was breathing. The Carters had been gone less than an hour. Mrs. Carter had handed me the keys, thanked me for being such a big help, and told me the rules in that fast, polite way adults talk when they assume everything will go fine. Feed Bear at night, let him out twice, no snacks off the table. I nodded like I had it handled, because I was proud they trusted me. I was 12 and I wanted to prove I wasn't a little kid. But Bear was proving something else. He'd followed me everywhere since they left. Kitchen, living room, front porch. Big golden retriever, friendly, slobbery, always leaning into you like you were his best friend. He'd even carried his own leash in his mouth when I said, "Outside." Then we reached the hallway. Halfway down, he stopped. Hard, like he'd hit a wall. I knelt beside him, rubbing the side of his neck, trying to calm him down. "It's okay," I said quietly. "There's nobody in there." His eyes stayed fixed on the door. His nose twitched once, twice. Then he took one step back. That's when my stomach tightened. I turned and looked at the spare room door. Plain white. Brass knob. The kind of door you don't notice until you do. I tried to laugh it off. "You're being dramatic," I told him. "You're not scared." The Bear's lips pulled back just enough to show teeth. Not in anger, but in fear. And the sound in his throat got deeper. Like he was begging me not to make him go closer. I stood up slowly, heart starting to beat too hard. The Carters hadn't said anything about the room being off limits. They hadn't said it was under renovation, or messy, or full of stuff. It was just a room. "Fine," I said like I was the boss. "We won't go in there." I tried to lead him away, back toward the living room. He didn't relax until we were out of the hallway. That night, when I fed him, he ate like normal. When I let him out, he peed like normal. He even brought me the rope toy again and wagged his tail, doing his goofy little hop like he wanted me to throw it. But every so often, he'd pause and look down the hallway. And every time he did, my skin prickled. I tried to distract myself with TV, sitting on the couch with the remote in my lap. The house was quiet in that way. Big houses get quiet when you're alone in them. Not peaceful, just empty. Bear lay at my feet for a while, then got up and walked to the edge of the hallway entrance like he was checking a boundary. He stared for a long time, stiff as a statue, then came back and pressed against my leg. "Buddy," I whispered, rubbing his head. "What is it?" He didn't look at me. He kept watching the hall. When it was time for bed, I didn't want to go to the guest room they'd told me to use, because it was farther down the hall. It meant walking past the spare room door. I stood there with Bear beside me, keys cold in my hand, listening. Nothing. No voices. No footsteps. No scratching. Just silence. I started walking. Bear followed at first, but when we got close to the spare room door, he stopped again. He wouldn't come any closer. He sat down right there, blocking the hallway like he was guarding something. "Bear," I whispered, "I have to go to bed." His eyes stayed on the door. I swallowed hard and forced myself to walk past him alone. It felt wrong instantly. Like I was leaving my only protection behind. I got into the guest room, shut the door, and lay on the bed fully clothed for a minute, because I couldn't relax enough to change. My heart beat loud in my ears. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was being stupid. Then I heard it. A soft sound from the hallway. Not footsteps. A slow, wet tap, like a drip hitting wood. My stomach turned over. I sat up fast and listened. The tap came again. Tap, tap, tap. Steady, patient. I got off the bed and opened the guest room door a crack. Bear was still sitting in the hallway, facing the spare room door, completely rigid. His head was slightly lowered now, his body tense like he was bracing for impact. The tapping sound was coming from the spare room. I whispered, "Beer." He didn't move. His eyes flicked to me for half a second, and the look on his face made my throat go tight. It wasn't an animal look. It was a warning. Like he wanted me to understand something without making a sound. Then the tapping stopped. The silence after felt heavy. I shut my door and locked it, which made me feel ridiculous because it was an inside door. I climbed back into bed and pulled the blanket up to my chin, even though I wasn't cold. I wasn't cold yet. I lay there awake for a long time, staring at the dark, listening for any sound that didn't belong. At some point I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember is Bear barking. Not his normal bark. A sharp, frantic bark that sounded like panic. I shot upright and grabbed my phone. The screen glowed bright in my face. The time read 3:17 in the morning. Bear barked again, then whined, then barked again, like he was stuck in a loop. I jumped out of bed and opened the door. Bear was standing now, body angled toward the spare room, hackles raised. His paws were planted wide like he was trying to stand his ground. And the spare room door was open. Just a crack. I froze so hard I couldn't move. The light from my phone screen barely reached that far. The gap in the door looked like a black slit. "Bear," I whispered, voice shaking. "Did you do that?" A bear didn't look at me. He kept barking at the crack, backing up half a step every time he barked, like he was scared the door would open wider. I took one step forward. Bear barked louder, like he was yelling at me too. "Okay," I whispered quickly. "Hands up." "Okay, I won't." But I did. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or the stupid part of me that thought I had to fix it before the Carters came home. I walked closer, one slow step at a time. The air in the hallway felt different now. Cooler. Not normal cool, like the air conditioner kicking on. This was like standing near an open freezer, and it smelled like rain. Not wet carpet, not mildew. Rain, clean and sharp and cold. My mouth went dry. What the? Bear's barking turned into this harsh, desperate whining that made my eyes water. He wanted to run. I could see it in his body. But he wouldn't leave the hallway. He stayed between me and the door like he was trying to keep me from crossing an invisible line. I reached the spare room door and placed my fingers on the knob. The metal was cold enough to sting. I stared at the crack, heart pounding, and pushed it open. The air that came out felt like it belonged outside during a storm. It washed over my face and arms, raising goosebumps instantly. I stepped into the doorway and lifted my phone higher, using it like a flashlight. The room looked normal at first. A bed with a cover, a dresser, a small window. Nothing moved. Nothing jumped out. Nothing screamed. Then my eyes dropped to the floor. Right in the middle of the carpet was a footprint. A bare footprint. Muddy, dark, perfect. Toe marks. Heel. The curve of an arch. And the carpet around it was dry. The footprint looked fresh. Like someone had stepped there seconds ago. But there were no other footprints leading in. No trail. Just one single print like a signature. I couldn't breathe for a second. My whole body locked up. My brain tried to explain it fast. Someone tracked mud in earlier. It dried. It's old. It's something. But the mud was wet. Shiny. It reflected the light from my phone screen. And then I saw something worse. The footprint was small. Not adult small. Not like a woman with small feet. Kid small. About my size. My stomach dropped so hard it made me dizzy. Behind me, Bear stopped barking. The sudden silence terrified me more than the barking ever did. I turned my head slowly. Bear was still in the hallway, but his ears were down now, and he was staring past me, past the doorway, at something inside the room, something I couldn't see. His mouth opened slightly, and a thin string of drool hung there like he'd forgotten to swallow. Then he backed away. 1 step, 2 steps. His nails clicked on the wood. He looked like he was being pushed back by fear, like whatever he was looking at had moved closer. I whispered, "Beer." My voice sounded small and wrong. And then I heard it, a soft inhale, not mine, from inside the room, right behind me. I spun around so fast my phone almost flew out of my hand. The room was empty. Bed, dresser, window. But the air felt heavier now, pressing against my face like humidity before a storm. My eyes dropped back to the footprint, and the mud inside it started to move. Not sliding, sinking, like the carpet was swallowing it. The dark shape slowly seeped downward, disappearing into fibers like it was being pulled under. My skin went ice cold. "No," I whispered. The footprint faded until there was nothing left. Just clean carpet, dry, normal, like it had never existed. Then the smell of rain got stronger, and the cold deepened until my teeth started to chatter. My phone screen flickered once, twice, then went black. I stood in complete darkness for half a heartbeat, blind and shaking, and that was when I felt it. A hand on my shoulder, not grabbing, not squeezing, just resting there, heavy and cold. I couldn't scream. The sound wouldn't come out. All I could do was whisper, "Please don't." The hand lifted, and something brushed past me toward the hallway. A rush of cold air, so close it felt like someone walking by. Bear let out one single yelp, high and terrified, and bolted. His nails skidded across the floor, and I heard him slam into the living room, scrambling on tile. That broke me. I ran. I ran out of the room and slammed the door so hard the knob rattled. My hands shook so badly I couldn't even turn the lock. But I tried anyway, twisting it over and over until it clicked. I sprinted into the living room, where Bear had hidden behind the couch, pressed flat to the floor, trembling. I dropped down beside him, hugging his neck like he was a life jacket. "It's okay?" I whispered, even though it wasn't. "It's okay." I sat there until morning, not moving, not blinking much, just listening for footsteps, listening for that slow, wet tapping. Nothing came. When the Carters came home, I didn't act normal. I couldn't. Mrs. Carter smiled and asked if Bear was good. "He's fine," I said too quickly. "He ate. He went out." "He went out?" Carter laughed. "He give you any trouble?" I stared at the hallway like it could hear me. He didn't like one of the rooms. Their smiles faded just a little. Just enough. Mrs. Carter glanced at her husband. "What room?" she asked, even though she already knew. "A spare room," I said. My voice cracked. It was open. There was a footprint. Silence. "Mr. Carter's face tightened. "What kind of footprint?" Barefoot, I whispered. Small, like a kid. Mrs. Carter's eyes went shiny. She pressed a hand to her mouth, like she might gag. Mr. Carter exhaled slow through his nose, like he'd been holding his breath for years. We told ourselves it was nothing, he murmured. We told ourselves Bear was being weird. I stood there shaking. What is it? Carter wiped her eyes hard. It's our son's room, she said, voice breaking. Hey, he died before you were born. Fever. Took him fast. My stomach twisted. Then why is it still? Mr. Carter cut in, voice sharp with pain. Because we can't let it go, he said. We kept it the same. We kept thinking, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it would feel wrong to change it. Mrs. Carter stared at the hallway. Bear never goes in there, she whispered. He refuses. He always has. I felt sick. Not in a ghost story way. In a real way. Like I'd stepped into someone's grief, and it had stepped back into me. Mr. Carter walked to the spare room door, hesitated, then unlocked it with shaking hands. He opened it slowly. Nothing happened. No cold air. No rain smell. No footprint. Just a clean, quiet room. Mrs. Carter let out a broken sob. Why did it show itself to you? I didn't have an answer. But I did notice one thing. On the carpet, near the bed, there was a small square of darker fabric. Like something had been wet there and dried. Not a footprint. Just a faint stain. Mr. Carter saw it too. His shoulders sagged. It's still here, he whispered. I swallowed hard. What do you do? He looked at his wife, then back at the room, and his eyes hardened with something that felt like decision. We stop pretending, he said. We stop leaving the door closed like it's a secret. That afternoon, they called their pastor. Not to bless the house like in movies. Just to sit with them, to talk, to pray, to say their son's name out loud. They opened the room. They let sunlight in. They packed away the old toys and the little shoes in a box with shaking hands and tears they didn't hide. I stayed to help because I didn't know how to leave them alone with it. When we finally carried the last box to the garage, Bear walked down the hallway on his own. Slow, careful, he stopped at the spare room doorway and sniffed. Then, for the first time, he stepped inside. Just one step, then another. His tail lifted slightly, not wagging, but not tucked anymore. The air in the hallway felt normal again. No cold, no rain smell. Just a house. Mrs. Carter put a hand over her mouth and cried quietly. Mr. Carter held her shoulders like he was keeping her upright. And I stood there shaking, realizing something I wish I'd understood before that night. Whatever was in that room wasn't trying to scare us. It was stuck. And the only way it stopped reaching out was when the people who loved it finally let it leave.